What's up everyone? Welcome back to Earth 2 Editorial, the YouTube channel where we talk about culture and heritage. So one of the topics that we've been covering a lot recently has been over-tourism, and really for good reason. Over-tourism has been on the lips of nearly every traveler and tourism board in 2024 because there have been over 1 billion international travelers this year alone. As we can see in examples like in Barcelona or in Venice or some places in Thailand, there are some areas that are being affected more by over-tourism than others, and unfortunately some spots just simply can't handle the number of visitors that come in every year and sometimes even every day. But traveling the world, experiencing new cultures, and getting this thrill of life, these are all reasons that we love to travel, right? But what happens when everyone loves to travel to the same place? When the crowds get too big, the impact can be devastating. And some places around the world are starting to show the scars of over-tourism. If you're curious what places in particular we're talking about, we've got 10 examples that we're going to get into in this video. So let's check them out. Venice, Italy, the epitome of romance. The city built on water. Marco Polo's hometown. Everybody wants a piece of the winding canals and the ancient roadways. It's simply stunning. Actually, the Venice that we see nowadays doesn't look anything like it did even decades earlier. Although cruise ships were outlawed in some areas of the city, there are still instances where cruise ships bring in daily tourists at an alarming rate. And what ends up happening is that the canalways get jam-packed with visitors, so much so that locals can't get out of their own homes. They literally can't leave the front door. Furthermore, Venice is sinking. Now, it's not where it's going to be gone by tomorrow, but there's so many visitors on foot and so many different crowds on the canalways at a certain time that they simply can't handle it. The infrastructure is literally collapsing under the number of tourists. But what's really sad, Venice is starting to feel like a theme park, like the Epcot of an old merchant city. It's really sad that a lot of residents, some of whom have lived there for generations, are now getting pushed out due to skyrocketing pricing in houses and not enough available houses. Also, that thing I mentioned earlier about not being able to walk out of their front door probably isn't the funnest experience on a day-to-day basis. So by 2030, they estimate that there are going to be no more full-time residents of Venice, and anyone who's coming into the city might do so on a daily basis just to cater to the tourists. For destination number 2, this is pretty interesting because it is an ancient structure, but us in modern times have only known about it for a little over 100 years. Since its rediscovery in 1912, Machu Picchu has made some pretty significant milestones. Not only is it being excavated more and more every single year and unearthing new parts of the ancient city that we didn't know existed before, it's also one of the 7 world wonders and a UNESCO heritage site, and it's also one of the most popular places to go see. It was my dream to see Machu Picchu, and this year I finally got to see that dream through. And as I was walking around a curved bend, finally the city came into view in the background, and I burst into tears. I wasn't ready for the sight, and there was truly no picture on the internet that prepared me for the in-person experience. The issue is the sheer number of visitors. When Machu Picchu was built, it was only able to withstand a few hundred people, if that. But now you have thousands of daily visitors and millions of annual visitors who are clomping around the rocks. Now, to be fair, there are a lot of people who are incredibly respectful of Machu Picchu and who are trying to do as much preservation as they can, even while visiting. However, unfortunately, there are also some tourists who are not as respectable as others. And so in recent years, there had been some issues in Machu Picchu where people were climbing up and down rocks or ancient structures that they probably shouldn't have and leaving trash everywhere. So only in the last few years, the tourism board established these different routes. Right now, there are 4 circuits where you can walk through Machu Picchu in one of the circuits, or multiples if you have the time, and you really have to stick to that route. You can't go anywhere else. So in the last years, they've been working really hard to offset some of these challenges, but as it stands, there's just a lot of visitors who come every single year. And they've also limited the number of daily visitors that they let in. When I booked my ticket for Machu Picchu, I had to book it 4 months in advance, and even that was already filling up. So it seems like there's a pretty high demand, and you kind of have to jump on the opportunity early and make sure you get your time slot when it's available. So it's clear that the tourism boards are making efforts to try to limit the impact, but still, let's not forget that Machu Picchu is wildly popular and a lot of people want a piece of that. Bali, Indonesia is a tropical destination that has also somehow become like a digital nomad capital. And of course, with the large volume of visitors also means that those beautiful, pristine beaches are being covered in litter and there's trash everywhere, and jungles are being paved over with roadways, and there's congestion in the streets, and really all of those negative aspects of tourism. However, there is also a paradox of tourism too, particularly in a place like Bali, where it attracts a lot of international visitors or digital nomads who are living there temporarily or maybe are long-term residents. That might mean that the economy is getting flushed with tourist dollars. And this is a really common double-edged sword, where on one side you have to deal with the negative aspects of over-tourism, but you might also be seeing a large volume of tourist dollars that are improving the economy in some way. Still, Bali gets around 6 million visitors per year, and that cannot be doing anything good for the ecosystem. The Galapagos Islands, home of some of the most unique, interesting nature and wildlife, unlike anywhere else on the planet. The Galapagos Islands are so extraordinary that they even inspired Charles Darwin on his natural selection theory. But of course, Charles Darwin is not the primary reason to visit the Galapagos. If you were an enthusiastic bird watcher, this would pretty much be your holy grail. However, this is an instance of loving something so much that you hurt it. Because as new travelers come in, so do invasive species in luggage, in shipping containers, and all of these things are coming into the Galapagos Island, which originally had been a pretty tightly contained area. These invasive species are actually coming in and now creating an imbalance in this ecosystem. And this causes one of the biggest ironies in tourism, which is when someone who is a nature lover or is, let's say, otherwise sustainably conscious, loves the environment and wants to celebrate it and preserve it, goes to a place like the Galapagos Island and ends up destroying it. Then there is Barcelona, a must-see for every traveler. Though don't tell a resident I said that, because behind every famous landmark, there is an overload of tourism that is actually hurting the economy and hurting the local experience. Barcelona is one of the hottest markets for short-term rentals, which means that houses and apartments are getting snatched up before a local can even buy it. And that means that they're getting priced out, not only because of the rising costs, but because of a lack of availability. In some neighborhoods, it's almost impossible to find a place to live unless you're staying in a tourist apartment. And major attractions like La Sagrada Familia are seeing so many visitors that they're starting to cater more towards those visitors. And the beauty and charm and uniqueness of Barcelona starts to feel a little less unique. So much of the city now revolves around tourism that it's almost impossible to feel like you still have a hold on the cultural identity of the city. And a list of places changed by over-tourism is simply not complete without Greece. Specifically, Santorini. Really the essential image of Mediterranean Greece. In fact, so much so that it is essentially the postcard of Greece. But let's be real here. Santorini is anything but a hidden gem. The rush of visitors is causing problems just about everywhere in the tourist hotspots. Overcrowded streets, overcrowded pathways, overpriced restaurants, and not enough houses. A very, very similar story being told in many other places around the world. New luxury hotels and resorts are springing up just about every single year. But that means that people are getting priced out of their homes and there's a lack of available space. But also there's no more cultural identity that really resonates with the true Grecian life. In other words, Santorini is suffering from its own success. Even if you've never heard of Maya Bay in Thailand, I can almost guarantee you've seen it at least once. This particular bay had been the filming location of that 2000 movie, The Beach, starring Leonardo DiCaprio. Ironically, in the movie, it was viewed as this idyllic, untouched, unknown bay that was absolutely beautiful and teeming with wildlife, most of which was actually true up until 2000. And then after that, it became anything but. At its peak, Maya Bay was seeing up to 5,000 visitors per day. And this actually led to the bay famously closing in 2018. At that time, conservationists had no idea when it would reopen or if it would ever reopen. They cited major issues both in the water and above ground. It's crazy, but the coral reef had actually been destroyed by a number of things, but notably the chemicals found in sunscreen. Now, since 2018, the bay has reopened and there's been major improvements in the coral reef and the overall ecosystem. But I think for many years ahead, there is going to be an uphill battle getting Maya Bay back to what it once was. Cinque Terre, a UNESCO heritage site, is next on our list. Those 5 colorful villages seemingly built on the side of a cliff in Italy. What's not to love? This place is so beautiful and iconic that it was also part of several movie sets. However, I would say the destruction of Cinque Terre has been due to a lot of the influencer marketing that we see on social media. Now it's seen as like the it place to be in Italy. So many different terrace rooftops and restaurants to go eat at with ocean views. Of course, it's stunning, but you have to wonder how good or even authentic these restaurants are if they're catering just to tourists. But of course, we're just talking about what's happening inside of these 5 cities. What's happening outside of them is also pretty significant. There are roadways and hiking trails that connect them, and they're being eroded or crowded from just too many visitors at one given time. Particularly during the summer months, it's almost impossible to get anywhere without a traffic jam. The next one might come as a surprise to you because even though we've talked about so many places that are getting millions and millions of visitors per year, this one doesn't get nearly that many. However, the size and the scale of the infrastructure and the country itself can't really handle the number of visitors that come in. We're talking about Iceland. For anyone who's never been to Iceland before, you might assume it's just one big sheet of ice and that's it. But actually, there are glaciers, and then there's also volcanoes and lava and geysers everywhere. I mean, it's absolutely insane. Just so many different natural phenomena that are happening in one place. What's also really interesting about Iceland is that it's where the American and the European tectonic plates meet in the middle. It's crazy. So technically, you can be on 2 different continents at one time. Of course, due to all of this, people are flocking to Iceland, not nearly in the millions and millions and millions, but enough so where locals definitely feel it, especially during busy seasons. While this has been really good for Iceland's economy, there are, of course, nuisances that come with this. Some of the really popular things to do, like driving the Golden Circle, do get overrun by tourists. And let's not forget the Blue Lagoon, which is a hot spring that essentially gets packed with people starting really early in the morning. Many visitors who go to Iceland comment on how remote and unique it is. But one thing to keep in mind is that it is so remote and it is so unique, but many of these areas in that country were never intended for a large crowd to be climbing all over. Oh, and speaking of remote places not intended for millions of people to climb over, we have Mount Everest. I mean, okay, climbing Mount Everest is not exactly the same thing as like taking a nice leisure holiday in Venice and dealing with some annoying crowds. It's grueling. It's absolutely grueling. And no one, unless they are physically fit and capable, should attempt to do something so significant as climb Mount Everest. But a lot of people do. This had once been the realm of intrepid travelers, adventurers, and perhaps the psychotic. But believe it or not, now it's a source of actual traffic jams by foot. Yes, seriously. There was a recent video online showing a line of people waiting in a queue to get to the top of Mount Everest. And keep in mind, this is not exactly a place where, you can sit on a rock and relax while you wait your turn. This is a mountain that's like got a peak like this and ice and snow are everywhere. You're literally dangling on by a cord. I mean, this is no place to be waiting in line. And yet, there are people who are doing it. Maybe it's funny to me. I just find this visual to be so ridiculous that it's kind of hilarious. But let's just not forget that it's actually incredibly dangerous. There's a real bottleneck to get to the top of Mount Everest, which means that travelers who are up there are spending a longer period of time in the elements, potentially putting themselves in greater danger. But it's not just the travelers who are under a lot of pressure. The local Sherpas who bring them up to the top are also being inundated with the sheer number of visitors who want to go, and they're also exposing themselves to the elements more than necessary. So we've just talked about some places that are feeling the effects of overtourism, but how can we as travelers do something about this? Of course, the solution is not so simple as to stop traveling, as I've heard some people say, because quite frankly, travel is essential for the human soul. I really believe that. You get to experience cultural connections, you get to see the world, and you also grow as a person, which I think everyone should try to do. But we do need to rethink the way that we travel. I think if you're interested in reframing how you want to travel, starting in sustainable tourism groups or going to lesser known destinations is usually a good starting point. Also, trying to take a bigger emphasis on culture and heritage and trying to get to know the place that you're visiting a little bit more deeper than just going from one tourist destination to another. I think these can really help enrich your experience, but will also make you feel like you're doing something more significant than just bopping around. So next time you travel, think about the where and the why. Because as a group of travelers, if we don't do this, we might lose our favorite places forever. Thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video and you found it informative. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them below and make sure to like and subscribe for more.